Welcome to the first Verts. Today we're going to tackle one of the verticals within the smart access control and smart lock industry and break down really where we think the market is going when it comes to that vertical or things that are happening at the time. So as always, I have Colin here with me. Colin, how you doing?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So thanks again for Salto to help make this happen, and excited to jump into the first vertical that we're going to talk about. So first vertical that we are going to break into is the enterprise. And if you take a look at what's going on in the enterprise right now, especially coming out of COVID and the pandemic, you're seeing the accelerated change right now of that marketplace due to a lot of things. Whether it's this need to have an understanding of who's coming and going of the facility beyond just the visitor management side. It's the extension of things like health attestation and communication to a hybrid workforce, whatever the next sort of new normal that people like to use, whatever that's going to look like. A lot has started to change in that space. And I would even go as far as saying, and I guess this will be sort of the first topic that you want to tackle, Colin, is I think that the enterprise from a software standpoint is going to start to look a lot like the hospitality and the multifamily marketplace does right now, where in a lot of ways you do have mechanical, yes, but we are now starting to see from a locking standpoint the experience, the user experience, the software starting to lead the specification and selection of the actual hardware that goes in for new construction. And then we're starting to see a specification happen from existing retrofit capabilities of people asking like, well, can my current systems that I have right now be able to do what these new use cases are? And I believe we're going to start to see a shift away from where we're just, again, about safety and security and the sort of value that gets created beyond the locking and unlocking. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, where to begin? But yes, I absolutely agree that we're in a evolution within the enterprise towards the credential holder being the true end user, right? As we've talked about with the resident in multifamily housing and the guest in hospitality. I think that all ties into the new use of space for an enterprise, right? I think you're probably going to start to see smaller HQs, right? And maybe more distributed, smaller workplaces. Well, that means more opportunity for people to not get through doors and trouble when they're trying to get to their remote workspace and all of those things. And kind of the terminology I used to use when we were first talking about this in the residential space was, in the commercial world, nobody chooses where they go to work and where they, if they're going to accept an offer of an employment based on how they interact with the door when they show up to work, right? But then you move into the residential space, then people would absolutely make a decision where they rent based on their interaction at the front door and at their unit door and how their visitors interact at those space. Well, as you move into this distributed workforce in remote working facilities, and whether that's at an HQ or an offsite or wherever, if that's my interaction every day as an employee, that may impact me, right? It may not be to the same level as renting, right? It may not be the only interaction that takes place, but it is absolutely interaction. If it takes me 15 or 30 minutes to get through a door, get set up at my desk, get logged onto a network, that's a big part of your experience every single day. So I absolutely agree that this idea of the employee experience within the enterprise's access setup is going to be a greater and greater impact, and we need to start looking at that employee as the end user in the enterprise, just like we've talked about the resident being the end user as opposed to the property manager or whoever purchases the equipment.
Yeah, especially too, I think as people are maybe not working in the office every single day, but this idea that when they do come to the office, if they have a locked door and they can't get in, this sort of case of, and we did a recent conversation with somebody from SAP who was talking about this case of belonging and how our systems before, again, they were based off of keeping bad people out. And there's a case of now making sure that the right people get in, and that entire experience of moving beyond just the front lobby. It's now at home with, like, again, using the applications and the extension of these systems into the engagement with employees. We've talked about this in the past, and I do think you can see a day now where if I had an existing system that wasn't functioning for these new use cases, that if engagement goes down and people get pissed off because they can't get into their office on a regular basis, there's a real chance that they actually could rip and replace the systems that exist, where before it was sort of like, yeah, I get it, but we're keeping bad people out, so we don't need to make any changes. It's actually working, right? Like, that was actually a feature, and now that is actually starting to become a bug.
Well, and I think that ties even further into the idea that manufacturers, integrators, and security practitioners have to start challenging themselves on not the need of the enterprise as a whole, but the need of the enterprise at each location also, right? Because if you start to treat a remote sales office with the same level of security and protection that you treat the data center, right? You're going to cause this massive disconnect from your employees who are saying, "Wait a minute, I gotta go through a retina scanner and a palm scanner and everything to send 5 emails." Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stay at home, right? And so part of this, how do you bring people into the office and things of that? All of those items become a bigger and bigger deal. And how do you take that security across the spectrum, as we've talked about, right? And that's not just the security practitioners who are determining that. Our manufacturers delivering and creating products that allow that to take place, whether that's hardware products, software products, whatever that is. As you see more and more locations pop up, I think, that's my opinion, right? I think you're going to start to see more locations, but a smaller footprint in each one of those things. How do you address them for that particular need at that particular location?
No, I agree with you. I think there'll be smaller locations. People are talking about they're going to shrink down, the square footage, but actually invest more into those so that it's an experience when people show up to their office, which then leads me to like these tenant experience applications and the interaction now of the space that you have. And I think about when I haven't worked in an office in a couple of years now, but when I did, it was habitual. You walked in, I went to the same desk that I had, I put my stuff down and went and grabbed coffee. I entered the exact same door. Like, it was a routine every single time. And now we're getting to the point with a lot of these things where that routine is based off of, capacity, what you're working on, the team that you might be, what office that you're at. It reminds me of when I did work recently out of a co-working space where I would utilize the office here in Bethesda as my main, but then any city I went to, they had a location. There were these areas of similarity to what the home base was, but they were very, very different. One of the areas that was different was like, how do I enter into this place, and how do I get in? And that it's confusing at that point. So you would think that if people are going to have that, there's going to need to be a level. Somebody's going to have to pay attention to the experience across, where it kind of reminds me of like Disney and some of these other places, or it's actually what Hilton and Marriott, the benefits of those hotels is like, when I go to a Hilton, I don't have to guess sort of how the room works. It's like every other Hilton. Some people may argue that that's a bad thing, but I actually think it's a good thing. It goes back to this idea of like, do people want more choice? Maybe, maybe not. But I do believe people like consistency. So these systems being able to work that way and function and have the flexibility built into them to go do that is going to be even more important. And I do think the next place where we're seeing this is the enterprise. That's where you're seeing a lot of money getting put into it. You got companies going public out of it. You've got megatechs and people like Google just announced today they're creating applications for the workplace. You've got Microsoft has their, Apple does their thing, like all of these big companies. So all of this money is going to be rushing into it. And if those companies do anything well, it's around experience. And if we believe that they're not going to impact how our systems work, good luck. I'm not going to die on that hill.
Yeah, absolutely. In the workplace apps that you're seeing. You know, a year ago we were talking about the explosion of the resident experience apps. Right now, everybody's launching their workplace apps. So at some point, you know, there'll be a Salto experience app, right? And whenever I go to one of our various locations, what is that experience going to look like? So there's no doubt that access as a function of a larger experience is moving into this enterprise world.
What's interesting too is that we're at the first innings of this, because I'm curious, when you have 900 different companies coming after this space, and you have, you know, let's say in a high rise, you've got the owner operator, you've got the tenant spaces, you got the property manager. You know, I'm interested to see also what happens when I have maybe at one location this and then the next location that, and how does the complexity of those systems kind of all go together? We see a little bit of it in the access control side right now with like PSIMs and whatnot, trying to solve that, but the level of complexity is just going to be even greater.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, right? Because I think in the multifamily world, right, we started this conversation around the resident experience, right? Well, the resident experience actually turned out to be, I don't want to make it sound easy, right? It turned out to be the simpler piece, right? The visitor and the guest experience seems to be the more difficult and really what the residents care about, right? How do my friends get in? How does my dog walker get in? How does my pizza delivery person get in, right? That visitor experience turned out to be the challenge. So when you get into this enterprise level, when you start thinking about commercial real estate, and now you've got 5 different companies operating in the same area, and now you're starting to deal with the visitor management and the guest experience and, you know, client experience coming to visit you at one of those locations. That's a whole nother level of complexity that we don't have time to get into today, but is critically important, right? As soon as we start to try to fix the employee experience, the client experience and interaction at that location is going to be right behind it.
This is where, and man, this could go a lot of places, but this is where now some of the soft skilled sort of, you know, like thinking about the stage presence and like the thoughtfulness that goes into that interaction and experience that is going to be needed, like, and who is doing that. Typically, if you look at like our industry, product managers are typically mechanically based on that end, right? Even a lot on the software side, it's an aspect of like they product manage how things communicate. It's rare that we see a lot of people that come from an arts background or understand anthropology.
It's right. It's more of a security and function versus experiential.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder sometimes
so.
if you take somebody who puts on, you know, plans weddings and like conferences. No, but like that understands, or an architect. Like I think about a good buddy of mine that's an architect. He understands people in space, right? So it's like his mind just totally is. You know, I always joke that he thinks vertically where I think sort of horizontally. It's like it's just a different way of looking at it. But I don't know. Again, early innings. It'll be interesting to look back a year from now. It's, you know, if anybody says that they really know what's going on here, I think they're full of it. So that's why I think the conversation is important to spark that and to go do that. So again, just the beginning. I appreciate you doing that. So before we end though, and thinking about what our next one is going to be, I wrote down 3 verticals that are here. Though I want you to pick 1, 2, or 3.
I think I picked 2 last time, so we're going to go.
All right, we're going to pick
3
religious and church and facility. All right.
All right.
Places of worship.
Places of worship. Interesting.
All right. I know. I went a little bit different on that one.
That had not been on our radar.
I said I wrote down 3. You want to know what the other ones were? Okay.
No, we're good. I like this game.
All right, cool.
It keeps me on my toes.
Places of worship next time. That's the next vertical. So thank you, Colin. Have a great week, and look forward to doing it next time.